So the Mueller report found no evidence of Trump collusion. There were no charges of obstruction, but Democrats still debating whether or not to impeach the president.
If the special counsel, as he made clear, had found evidence exonerating the president, he would have said so. He did not.
Now, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, saying that she'll sign onto an impeachment resolution, while the number 2 House Democrat, Steny Hoyer, says impeachment is not worth it.
Well, our next guest led the charge in the impeachment process against President Bill Clinton in the 90s and has a message for the Democrats.
Here with more, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, also a Fox News contributor, of course, and host of a brand new podcast, Newt's World. Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
It's good to be with you guys.
Well, how do you digest this report? Go for it.
Well, I mean, first of all, it may surprise you, but I agree with Steny Hoyer. My experience in the late 90s, we had a report from Ken Starr, which said explicitly, you can pull it up, it's a public document. It says President Clinton is guilty on 11 counts. 5 of them said he's guilty on obstruction. Now, you take 11 counts of guilty, compare it to the Mueller report, which does not allege any criminal guilt of any kind. And Starr's talking about criminal guilt. We took that, and the country, at the end of the debate, said, you know, we're more worried about the economy. We're more worried about health care. We don't think this rises to the standard of removing a president. And I would say that Steny Hoyer is more correct than I was back then. I thought it was appalling that we had a president who had broken the law on 11 different counts. He did lose his license to practice law in Arkansas. He was clearly guilty, but at the same time, the country rendered a larger judgment. Now you're in a different situation entirely. Mueller came back and said 2 years. Remember, 12 of his lawyers were career Democrats. 1 was a Republican. None of them gave any money to Trump in his campaign. So you had a pretty heavily stacked deck. If they could have found him guilty, they were going to find him guilty. They spent 2 years, and they couldn't find, I think, 500 witnesses. They couldn't find him guilty. So at some point, you got to, give it up. And frankly, the biggest thing that comes out of the details is that the president is a very aggressive entrepreneur. If you take his relation with Don McGahn, for example, the president's pushing, he's shoving. That's what entrepreneurs do. But every single time he was told you can't do that, he didn't do it. And so what you now have is a report that shows you how the president was thinking, but he didn't do anything. I don't blame the president for aggressively
Isn't
trying
he
to
allowed
figure
to do
out
that? Isn't he allowed to
how
think?
end this.
I mean, think about the deep state or the investigators that were thinking about wearing a microphone. They talked about it, and they didn't.
Look, not according to the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC. I mean, they take this I think, admirable behavior, which you see him on foreign policy, you see him on the economy. Trump is a very aggressive, very intelligent guy who's pushing the margins. He thought he was elected to change things, so he's trying to change things. Don McGahn deserves a lot of credit because he stood his ground. He said, you know, Mr. President, you can't do this. And the president said, well, Don, I mean, if you really think I can't do it, I guess I won't do it. So it's the opposite of Nixon and Watergate. This is the story of the president who obeyed the law, the president who did what was right. And I think the Democrats will presently look silly. I mean, I fully expect people like Ocasio-Cortez to be nutty and deranged and out of touch with reality. That's their role. But I think the average Democrat is going to pretty rapidly decide this is not a very sound direction to go in.
I don't know one Republican that has jumped ship. The ones that would have jumped out of Congress, it seems. But here's what here's the House Judiciary Chairperson, Gerald Nadler. He demands that Mueller now testify. The exact verbatim is, the Mueller report outlines disturbing evidence that President Trump engaged in obstruction of justice and misconduct. Just imagine what remains hidden from our view. So he wants Mueller to testify, and we know Barr's coming out on the 1st and the 2nd of May. Your thoughts?
Well, look, let him testify. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, let him come in and say, hey, I spent 2 years, interviewed 500 people, had an entire team of lawyers, spent $25 million. It ain't there. I think my guess is that Mueller will be a pretty impressive witness, but he'll be a witness for ending the process. But look at poor Jerry Nadler's problem. I mean, the left wing of his party is going berserk. They all want to find a way to keep this up. His presidential candidates are going berserk. He can't, as chairman, not look like he's doing something, or they'll frankly take away his chairmanship.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
That's the dance in the House right now.
Mr. Speaker, one of the dramatic parts of the report is this idea that in the Oval Office, when he finds out that there's been a special counsel named, the president blisters the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, why didn't you protect me, and says, I'm effed, among other things. Some critics thought that meant that he was admitting guilt. Instead, the report suggests the president was saying, look, I'm going to be crippled here for a couple years. This happens with every independent counsel. And so my question is, take that and push us forward. Now that maybe this cloud is lifted, what do you think this president can accomplish in the next 2 years?
Well, let's remember what he has accomplished already. Enormous change in the judges. A huge number of conservative judges have been appointed, and with Mitch McConnell's leadership have been gotten through the Senate. Tremendous deregulation, biggest in history, liberating the economy. Huge tax cuts which have led the economy to grow. Lowest unemployment rate for African Americans in history. Lowest unemployment rate for Latinos in history. Lowest unemployment rate for women in history. Income's starting to rise. I mean, here's a guy who, while he has 90% negative press coverage and he has an ongoing investigation, he just plows ahead. So I think you have to assume now that he has been exonerated in every possible way, he's going to be stronger. His reelection is going to be more likely. People around the world are going to accommodate him. They're going to start saying, you know, I got to deal with this guy through 2024.
You're the
that is an enormous change from a week ago.
You're the political expert, but if I'm the president, I would just stay out of the nitty-gritty. This is done. This is in my rearview mirror, moving ahead. It does no good to relitigate any of these situations. But what are the chances of that?
Well, first of all, I think if the president wants to relitigate, he ought to say, how come they're not investigating what the Obama administration failed to do? It knew from 2014 on that the Russians were trying to affect our election. Yeah. Apparently, in order to appease Iran and get the Iranian deal, they didn't want to deal with the Russians. And apparently, some senior Obama people said flatly, cut it off, don't look at it, don't pay attention. That's a huge dereliction of duty.
No doubt.
Second, I think they ought to be looking at, and Barr has said he will, how many of these guys were breaking the law by leaking things that were false?
Those leaks are now going to be investigated, Mr. Speaker.
The senior FBI.
Yeah, we got to run. We appreciate you coming in, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you need more Newt, listen to his podcast, please.
We always need more Newt.
Yeah.
All right. Meanwhile,
I see considerable evidence of obstruction of justice, which is what Mueller said. He lays it out for Congress, and he practically invites Congress to pursue that. Barr took it upon himself to announce that he decided to clear the president. It's not up to him. We need the whole report. We need the whole report, including the underlying documents, unredacted.
Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler, that's just a few moments ago, slamming the Attorney General yet again and calling for the full, unredacted Mueller report.
Here to react is Mark Levin, host of Life, Liberty, and Levin. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning, and it's always good to wake up to a slip and fall lawyer like Jerry Nadler. And they'll bring their lawsuit and they'll lose. So this is all about the press. And I'd like to get to that in a minute. But if I could talk about this report. Everybody's focused on Volume 2, aren't they? Including us. Volume 2. What did McGahn say, and why did the president tell McGahn not to say this? Why do we keep focusing on this? This report, Volume 2, doesn't have a syllable of legal significance. There's not a syllable of law in it. It doesn't matter what McGahn said or what the president said. None of it's been tested in a court of law. There's been no challenge to it. There's been no cross-examination. Nothing. That's why Mueller wrote this. This is a political document that he should never have written. A political document that's 200 pages long that the press keeps focusing on. That's why he and Weissman and the others wrote it, because he knew he knew CNN would be obsessed with it. He knew that MSNBC would be obsessed with it. This is an op-ed. This is a 200-page op-ed. That's all this is. No prosecutor who wouldn't want to be disbarred would ever produce anything like this, talking, well, this guy said this, and why did the president say that? How do you know? Well, the prosecutor said. Well, who gives a damn what the prosecutor said? He's not God. He's not a judge. He's
but
not
Mark,
a jury.
they're quoting the White House counsel. Doesn't whether or not the president told Doesn't whether the president told the truth or not matter to you?
It matters completely to me. So how do you know this is truthful, Ed?
He's the White House counsel. You think he lied to the
How do you
investigator?
know this is truthful, Ed? You have no idea. You know that the prosecutor put words in here that he was told by another individual. That has never been challenged. President says he didn't say that. So you have no idea. I have no idea. That's why we have a court of law. That's why prosecutors, damn it, are not supposed to write essays like this. Now we have a special counsel. And the Democrats knew a special counsel could write a report. They're not focused on volume 1, which is legal, which does cite law, which was an investigation that found no collusion. That was the purpose of the investigation. Obstruction was not the purpose of the investigation, and he didn't have an obstruction case against the President of the United States, or he would have brought it. I'm using plain English so even Joe Scarborough and Jake Tapper can understand this. Volume 2 is crack. Volume 2 was written for slip-and-fall lawyer Nadler, slip-and-fall lawyer Schiff. That's why he wrote it. He knew the media would run with it. Volume 1, Mr. Mueller should have come up to a microphone 12 months into his investigation and announced to the American people, I have great news. The president didn't collude. His campaign didn't collude. There's no collusion. I'm shutting down this investigation. I got Manafort. I'll give it to the U.S. Attorney in Virginia. I'll give this one to the Southern District of New York. He didn't do it. Why didn't he do that? And right to the end, they're trying to get the president's in-person testimony about something he knew never happened. Collusion. And yet, why is this report even faulty? How can you talk about Russia interference in our election and ignore the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC and the senior level of the FBI that's been wiped out by their own conduct? How in the world can you do that, not interview Barack Obama and Susan Rice and all the rest of them? This is a hack job. Now, where are we here? Where are we here? From my perspective, it's now a matter of the American people versus the press, or I would call them the unfree press. We had a report by the Schwarzman Center at Harvard. It's going to be in my new book. The first 100 days of coverage of Trump presidency, they looked at 7 major media outlets, including Fox. CNN and NBC, 90% negative. The rest of the media, 70 to 80% negative. Fox, 52-48 negative to positive, the only even-handed one. And they said, this is Harvard, not me, in every dimension, the reporting was overwhelmingly negative. This isn't a free press. This isn't serious. They keep bringing this fool Nadler up there. He's going to bring a phony lawsuit. He's going to subpoena this trashing of an Attorney General of the United States who followed the law. I want the American people to understand something real fast. The way the regulation reads is this report, which he didn't have to produce this, the prosecutor, he wanted to produce this. This report goes to the Attorney General of the United States. He's not an observer. He's in the regulation. He decides what to say, what not to say. He decides what's relevant. He's the Attorney General of the United States, not Robert Mueller.
All right,
so
Mark.
they are destroying the Attorney General of the United States. The media are, because they destroy anybody who stands up to the mob.
Well, we're going to see, because the Attorney General is going to be up there on the 1st and 2nd. I think he'll just do fine for himself, and then we'll go from here. Mark Levin, we're going to watch you on the weekend, Life, Liberty, and Levin, and we're going to go
Saturday and Sunday.
And it's not too early to pre-order your book, right?
It's never too early, as you well know, Brian Kilmeade.
On Freedom of the Press.
All right, the great one. Thank you, Mark.
God bless.